Coming up on Chasing the Natty, we've hit on how each of the major positions in CFF are being impacted by the transfer portal this year. All that is left to do is everyone's favorite position, the tight ends. We're also going to take some time to look at some of the newcomers to CFF, those coming up from the FCS level, and if any of them can make an impact in their first year at this level. All of that and more coming right after this.
Sellers picks his way to the right and is tripped up, reaching for the end zone. Touchdown. What a start.
Give it to Reed, and there he goes. Nobody's going to catch him. Touchdown.
It's caught. Jeremiah Smith. Touchdown, Ohio State. The legend grows.
This is Chasing the Natty, a college fantasy football podcast. All right, welcome in, everyone. This is Jared Palmgren, host of the Chasing the Natty podcast. Hope you guys are having a wonderful ride to your work on this Monday morning. We are the College Fantasy Football Podcast on the Campus of Canton Podcast Network. You can find us on all of your podcast feeds and on YouTube every Monday morning during the off-season at 6 a.m. sharp. If you want to support the great work we do here, head on over to campusofcanton.com. Subscribe there with any of our phenomenal tiers. We got content ranging on all sorts of college football games, whether that is CFF, Devy, C2C, College DFS. If you play it, then we've got content, whether that's tools, rankings, pretty much everything you need to succeed. In fact, right now, if you want to support the show directly, make sure when you sign up for one of our yearly memberships over there, you use that promo code NATTY, N-A-T-T-Y, to get 10% off of your yearly membership. Again, that is promo code NATTY, N-A-T-T-Y. You can't do that. That is totally fine. You can just show us some love by leaving a like, a comment, and a subscribe on the YouTube side of things. If you're on the podcast side of things, just leave a 5-star review. A written 5-star review is even better. And make sure you are following that show so you never miss a new episode. Not only does that show us support, but it also shows the entire game of college fantasy football in general a ton of support, because at this time of year, we are the only college fantasy show going on, at least regularly. BTR just released a new episode. They're pretty awesome too. If you got any further questions or want to get in touch for whatever reason, you guys can find me in the show on Twitter. I'm at CFF_Jared. The show is at Chasing the Natty, and the handsome fellow joining me once again is Mr. Chris Battistel. Chris, welcome back to the show, man. How are things going on your end?
I'm good, Jared. Thanks for having me again. 3 in a row. That's a good sign. And now it's a pattern. I'm here for good. We are now common law co-hosts, Jared. So there's no getting out of it without giving me half of your IP, buddy.
You know what? I wonder if we're gonna get 100 episodes into this, and you're gonna start every show off with like, Jared, listen, man, it's show number 100 here. All right, you're locked in now.
Yes, no turning back, man. Yeah, but I'm good. I'm getting into a little bit of a depression, just thinking the fact that the football season as a whole is coming to a close. We got the Super Bowl coming up, and then that's pretty much it. Looking forward to spring, of course, but not being able to watch, football on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. It's kind of put me in a little bit of a bad mood. So I'll be negative about some of these tight ends.
I will be absolutely rooting for my Birmingham Stallions in the XFL/UFL, whatever they call that league at this point. Yeah. In spring ball, I will be there. I just realized you were wearing a Georgia shirt today.
Yeah.
Flattery will get you everywhere, sir.
Recognized fame. Yeah. Luckily for me, I don't have an alma mater, so I can pretty much rock whatever gear I want. So I don't have a favorite team. I got, Wake Forest gear, Georgia gear. I got an Ohio State hat, Ohio State sweater. I got it all, man. I just can't wear it all at once, or I kind of look a little goofy.
Are you one of those people? Because you're from Canada, right? And so. Yeah. Are you one of those people where you kind of have a different team per conference that you kind of root for?
No, not necessarily. I like more players. I hope everybody has fun and it's just a good time all around, man.
Gotcha. I'm making this very clear that Chris is not a Georgia fan. Otherwise, Nate was going to kill me for bringing another Georgia fan into the CFF team here at Campus of Canton, because it's like me, VP's a Georgia fan, and then Nicholas Ian Allen's also a Georgia fan, and Nate started counting up at one point. He's like, "Wait a minute, Jared, you're just bringing in a bunch of Georgia fans. What is this?"
Hey, you're a smart guy, man. Smart guy.
So again, we got a fun show here today. Obviously, we've been discussing the major positions the last couple of weeks: quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers. All of those are much easier to project out and talk about than anything to do with the tight end position. Man, it is the wild, wild west at tight end this year. Really kind of looking at my rankings, probably the only one that I'd be really comfortable with, like taking ahead of the rest of the pack, I'd say is maybe Terrence Carter out of Texas Tech. Even then, you're having him compete with like four other options in that passing attack there. So it's like he's great last year. Who knows what that pecking order could be next year, especially with Brendan Sorsby, coming in and being the new quarterback and everything. He could have different places that he's looking. I mean, shoot, let's talk about last year. Everybody loved Joe Royer 2 years ago. Same system comes back, completely fell off the map last year. And so it's not great. There's a lot of guys I like, and a lot of guys we'll talk about here today. But I guess, Chris, how are you kind of navigating the tight end position this year?
Kind of the same way. What's that office saying? You wish you knew that you were in the good times before the good times ended, and long gone are the days of Harold Fannin putting up 23 points a week for us. So last year wasn't that exciting. This year, there's a small batch of guys that could see elite usage, but I'm not really going to chase too many of the unknown players. I'm going to try to hitch my way into some of these proven producers.
Yeah, I've noticed over the last several years that transfer tight ends, which this is going to make it sound like I'm going to say today's show is a waste of time, that's not what I'm saying, because it is important to talk about. But transfer tight ends in general, it is very hard to tell which ones are going to hit and which ones aren't. Because it's not like they don't hit, right? Because Tanner Koziel was a guy that I was kind of poo-pooing on last year. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But he was tight end 3, right? Dorian Thomas at New Mexico was a transfer tight end, but nobody was drafting him, right? Meanwhile, some of the guys that we were drafting just really did not pan out hardly at all. But again, it's just a tough position to really nail down. It is. Definitely a lot of intriguing guys that we can discuss here today, for the most part. So, with that being said, I'm going to throw it over to our overlord here at Campus Canton, Austin. He's going to talk to you guys about a couple of awesome businesses we're partnered with, and then we'll get right to it. So, see you guys on the other side.
Hey guys, Austin here to talk for a brief moment about Home Field Apparel, the best place to snag clothing for all my favorite schools and teams. Whether it's tees, sweatshirts, hats, joggers, or pretty much anything in between, Home Field Apparel has retro designs with a modern twist to satisfy fans from Ohio State to Drexel to Colorado School of the Mines. Plus, it's some of the comfiest clothing that I own. Use our promo code CAMPUS2CANTON, that's campus, the number 2 Canton at checkout, for 15% off your first purchase. What's up, guys? Austin here again to let you know about our partnership with Fast Draft, a best ball and DFS platform that hosts a ton of different contests. With the season over and season-long CFF best ball behind us, I know I'm looking for new contests that can scratch my drafting itch, and I think I have found just the thing. Fast Draft has a rookie-only contest called Origins. Each draft has 8 teams in it and is 6 rounds long. And as I've mentioned earlier, you only draft incoming 2026 rookies. I know I plan on max entering this thing, and I think it's going to be a ton of fun. So head on over to Fast Draft, and when you sign up, use code C2C, that's C2C, for a deposit match up to $50. Happy drafting.
All right, and we are back, and let's start diving right on into this, Chris. We're going to go semi-rapid fire reaction with this. We're not going to break these guys down one by one like we have in the last couple of weeks, where we're going to be spending, 10 minutes on each guy or anything like that. So I'll run through about 5 different guys here that I find interesting, and then Chris will kind of break down which ones we find the most interesting here. We'll start at the top here. Benjamin Brahmer, the former Iowa State tight end, headed over to Penn State following Matt Campbell. Obviously, that makes a lot of sense there. We got Patrick Overmeyer, the tight end out of UTSA, one of the 2 tight ends that they've been relying on the last couple of years. He is headed to Houston. We got Noah Myers, the tight end out of Western Kentucky, headed over to Syracuse. We have a combo of tight ends headed to SMU in Theo Melin Ostrom, the tight end out of Texas A&M, as well as Randy Pittman, the tight end formerly of Florida State and UCF. He is also headed to SMU. And then last but not least on this page, we have Juice Vereen, the tight end formerly out of UConn, headed over to Colorado State. So, Chris, which one out of these 5 really situations do you find the most intriguing?
The one I'm gonna pinpoint out of the group, for me at least, Benjamin Brommer's in a great position, of course, following his coach and his quarterback to Penn State. But I like Patrick Overmeyer going into Houston from UTSA. Overmeyer was the 1B to Houston Thomas's 1A at UTSA. Very similar profiles between the two. The usage didn't come late until the season for Overmeyer. The final 5 games is when Overmeyer really came into focus on that offense. My main concern, though, he does struggle with a little bit of drops. There has been the case where he gets cement hands at time and he's just not bringing in the ball when he should be. Now the look shifts to the Houston Cougars. Houston has a history of feeding the tight end, at least looking back into last year. Tanner Koziol, who you mentioned, 83 targets, high usage at the position. If Overmeyer steps into that role left behind, they have very similar analytic profiles, heavy slot usage. That was his primary alignment at UTSA. The key difference, though, for me between Koziol and Overmeyer is the contested catch rate. 60% career contested catch rate for Koziol. And then for Overmeyer, that number drops drastically to 46%. And he's a little less dominant in traffic, but he's still a receiving tight end. The new offensive coordinator, Slade Nagel, former tight end coach at LSU and Tulane 2024 when he was at LSU. Mason Taylor, second in the team at targets with 79. It was time at Tulane. The tight end was used very consistently to move the ball. The cleaner path to usage for Overmeyer over Noah Myers, Randy Pittman, Orstrom, even Juice Vereen can be seen in this group of 5. The scheme history supports the position. Trust is going to be the swing factor, and whether or not he's going to build that trust with the quarterback. If the role carries over for Overmeyer into Houston, the fantasy side could be really high going into 2026. Are your thoughts the same on Overmeyer, Jared?
In many ways, they are. I find it very funny that Houston is grabbing another tight end this year that I had the same thoughts about Overmeyer and Koziol in back-to-back years, where last year I was completely out on Overmeyer because, man, his efficiency numbers in 2024 were not great. 9.1 yards per catch, 1.36 yards per route run, only an 8 out of 7.3. Like, he was just not a very efficient guy. I didn't really want much to do with him at UTSA. He was still pretty good last year because across the board, he improved everything. He was 12.7 yards per catch last year, more touchdowns, higher yards per route run. That's one thing I do like to see. Koziol was kind of similar for me, where I looked at what he was doing at Ball State. Like, yeah, he had the volume at Ball State, but boy, his efficiency numbers were not great. I'm like, I don't know if he'll really translate at Houston. Well, I was dead wrong about that. Koziol was great last year. 74 catches, 727 yards, 6 touchdowns. That's as good as you're going to get out of tight ends nowadays. Even though he still wasn't the most efficient, clearly Houston wants to use the tight ends. Slade Nagel wants to use the tight ends in this offense. They went and grabbed probably one of the better tight ends out of this portal class. So I like Overmeyer there at Houston. Again, do I think he'll reach that high level that Koziol had last year? I don't think so, because they bring in Trent Walker. It's another good receiving option there. You got, obviously, Amari Thomas is still hanging around. So I don't think he'll get the 97 or 94 targets that Koziol got last year, but we don't need him to get that. We just need him to get 60 targets, and you're looking at a really solid option for CFF there. Let's see, where can we go here next? I do definitely want to touch on Juice Vereen. Juice Vereen here, man, top 10 tight end second half of last year before getting hurt in week 11. He could have been, quite frankly, a league winner down the stretch. Like, he was just on fire for that UConn offense down the stretch, where that offense was so fun because you just knew every single week Skylar Bell was going to get a touchdown at one point, Cam Edwards was going to get a touchdown at some point, and really as the start of that second half of the season came along, you knew Juice Vereen was going to get a touchdown in each of those games. Like, they were just scoring so much. It's like, it's how I get whenever I'm playing like CFB 26 or something like that, where If I'm just throwing up numbers on whatever team I'm playing that week, I'm just like, all right, I got to make sure every one of my guys gets a touchdown, and I
Every guy
start
gets a
spreading it
touch.
out, right? So
Yeah.
Vereen was absolutely one of those guys. He was great until he got hurt. Good news. He's following Jim Mora to Colorado State here. That's something we wanted out of Kevin Edwards. We didn't get that, but we do get Juice Vereen following him there. So I think this is one of the more easier to project kind of deals going into the season. I mentioned before, really outside of Terrence Carter, I'm not really sure I'm reaching up for any tight ends this year. So if that's the case, you got to look around the landscape. You got to pick your guys at tight end that you're going to kind of invest in over and over again and just pray you hit it out of the park. I think Vereen might be one of those big guys for me this year. I think I will be investing a lot in Vereen. What about you, Chris?
Yeah, I'm going to be taking a lot of Vereen as well, especially if I'm pushing the position to the back ends of my drafts. As early, he should be there for you if you decide to do that at the position. He was averaging 1.91 fantasy points per reception, which is the top end efficiency at the position. His ADOT was great. When he was getting elevated usage in those 4 games before he got injured, he was averaging 13.87 fantasy points per game. So efficiency wise, the opportunities should be there for him in the Colorado State offense. Like you said, following his former head coach, I'm gonna have, I think, quite a bit of Juice Vereen as well.
I also want to touch on Noah Myers here. I think a lot of people might be surprised that I kind of threw him into this group here of the first 5 tight end transfers here. This might be one that kind of flew under the radar for a lot of people. But with Dan Villari moving on from Syracuse, we know that Syracuse offense under Fran Brown the last couple of years has really liked to use that tight end position. I mean, Dan Villari got 55 targets in this offense last year. Obviously, Aranda Gadsden was just an absolute monster because, he was he was really tight end only 10% of the time. The rest of the time he was a slot receiver, but that's besides the point. Noah Myers is also kind of one of those in-betweeners that we've kind of seen the Syracuse offense likes to run. He had 48% in the slot last year, 46% in line for Western Kentucky. Obviously played an air raid system over there. I think coming to Syracuse, he will fit right in line with what they were doing with Villari last year. Again, don't hear what I'm not saying. This is not going to be a scenario where I think that Myers is coming in here. He's going to be the new Aranda Gadsden. I do think he can very much do what Villari did last year, though, because Villari... Man, 55 targets, 39 catches, 406 yards. He did that with some of the worst quarterback play I think we could have possibly seen with Syracuse last year. Like, it was just atrocious what Syracuse was dealing with there. And Villari was still doing all right, except for the fact he never found the end zone once last year. If Steve Angeli stays healthy this year, I think that once again we're going to see a pretty high ceiling for a Syracuse tight end here, and I'm going to be Myers will be another guy that I'll take plenty of shots on because I don't really see any other tight ends coming up in that room. So, Chris, your thoughts?
I might be on the other side of Noah Myers, Jared. Without
How
the
dare
volume,
you?
what you make, I'm
How
sorry.
dare you?
I'm so sorry. Might not see episode 4 or 100 at this point. You make great points there. He should see, if he is the tight end 1 for his team, for Syracuse, he should see the volume. But without that volume, he wasn't great. In the games where he failed to see 5 targets, and that's a sample size of 6 games, he averaged 2 targets per game and 12.5 receiving yards and 0 touchdowns. Not the greatest blocker. Wasn't really asked much of him at Western Kentucky. Wasn't his role. In the games where he played, I guess you should say, decent competition or a step up in competition, he had issues against Nevada and he had issues against Middle Tennessee. So there is a lot of risk with this player, and I just don't think I'm going to have a lot of Noah Myers, at least early in drafts, unless we can try to get some news of whether or not he's going to have that Dan Villari role. We can't. I mean, I want to look back at Aranda Gadsden, but like you said, Aranda Gadsden recruited as a wide receiver, positioned over to a tight end. They're just not the same type of players. So
no, and I want to make that very clear that I'm not saying he's going to be Gadsden.
Yeah, exactly. So
I do think he can be Villari, though.
He can be, but he's going to need to see the bulk of the volume, right? In the games where he doesn't see it, he's not a weekly starter for me. Best ball, I'll take a couple shots on him to fill up my room. But if I'm starting if weekly fantasy where I have to start my lineup every week, I just won't be able to trust him. There's other guys at the position that I will, like an Overmeyer. I'll trust a Brommer, trust a Vereen. Not really going to trust the two guys that are going to SMU. Their analytic profiles just don't do it for me. And Noah Myers fits in that group.
Let's talk about those two guys going to SMU there. Again, Theo Maylene Orstrom, Randy Pittman heading over to SMU there. To me, the thing that kind of really stuck out is that it does seem like SMU is at least trying, keyword trying, to replace RJ Maryland and Hibner here. Right? To me, like when I kind of broke them down, it very much feels like that's exactly what they're doing. Pittman coming in, kind of that in-betweener, a little bit more receiver than blocker. He'll kind of fit that Maryland role. Meanwhile, Orstrom, kind of the beefier guy like Hibner was last year. I could very much see a scenario where we end up seeing both of these guys end up with around 35, 40 targets throughout the season. Just the question is, do they kind of break away from what SMU has kind of trapped, guys like Maryland Hibner in the last couple of years here?
Yep. Yeah, I think at the end of the season, it's going to be that Bart Simpson meme where he says, at least he pulls out the cake, at least you tried, and then throws it in the garbage with these two guys. Pittman just doesn't do much after the catch. His average depth of target equals his yards per reception. So when he's getting the ball in his hands,
that's actually crazy.
He's not doing much. Yeah, he's not doing much after the catch. So he's not creating fantasy points for you. So, and then Orstrom's kind of the same, 6'6", the bigger guy, but none of them really produce with the ball in their hands. They're just going to have to be hyper targeted to be useful for fantasy. And I just don't think I'm going to own either one of these guys, or at least much of them.
The last guy on this page here, we both kind of avoided him for the most part, but Benjamin Brommer was tight end 11 last year.
Yeah.
Do we just kind of expect him to do the same here at Penn State, even though this is technically a jump up in competition, or do we think that him being more trusted in this offense, his third year in this offense, like you have to think Matt Campbell is going to rely on him potentially even more this year. I mean, he had 51 targets last year for the Cyclones. Think we can get up 55, 60 targets this year, or do you think that's kind of his cap?
Yeah, I could see it. If he gets 1 to 2 more targets per game, he could definitely reach that high-end volume for especially a guy that lines up mainly as an inline tight end. He was averaging around 1.7 to 1.8 fantasy points per touch, which puts him almost to those slot-heavy tight ends. So considering he's an inline guy, that's elite fantasy production for a guy that lines up mainly in line. So again, if he sees if he sees one more target per game, it's a great boost. If he sees 2 more targets per game, he could be that back end weekly tight end one for you. So I'm kind of expecting some of the same type of usage for Ben Brommer in Penn State.
The only thing that would have made me fully solidified on that potential ceiling is if Gabe Burkle didn't follow Matt Campbell from Iowa State to Penn State as well, but unfortunately he did. Can you imagine the level of hype for Brommer there would be if he was the sole tight end following them to Penn State? Yeah. But that's not what we have. Speaking of tight ends following people, let's move on to our second group of guys here, starting off with the former Penn State tight end, Luke Reynolds, headed over to Virginia Tech following James Franklin there. We have Walker Lyons, the former blue chip tight end out of USC, headed over to BYU. We have Brody Foley, the tight end 4 from last year, moving up in competition, headed over to Louisville. We also have Houston Thomas, the other UTSA tight end, headed to Texas A&M. And then we have our man Dorian Thomas, the tight end 7 from last year, transferring over to Cal. So, Chris, where do you want to start with these guys? Your face tells me you don't love it.
Can we move to the next slide? No, but they're kind of all the same guy. They all gonna go into the same bucket for me. Luke Reynolds, like you said, following his head coach, following the tight end coach from Penn State, who's now the offensive coordinator. Good slot rate percentage, good yards after the catch. 126 of his 229 receiving yards came after the catch. Should walk into Virginia Tech as immediately as the tight end 1. I think Benji Gosnell's still there, Jared. Is that right? He didn't move on,
I can take a look real quick.
But if he is, he's, Luke Reynolds is a better run blocker, a better pass blocker, or at least rated per PFF than Benji Gosnell. So he finished the fourth in targets last year in Penn State. The usage history screams draft me here. Plus, he's got elite mullet upside. So out of the 5, I'm probably going to put Luke Reynolds 1, and then, it's 2A, 2B, 2C, and 2D at this point for me.
Yeah, Luke Reynolds was a very big disappointment for me last year. I hyped him up a ton. Yes, Gosnell, it does appear, is returning to Virginia Tech next year, so that'll be a little bit of a thorn in the side there. But like I said, Reynolds, big disappointment for me last year. I'm trying not to let that cloud my judgment for me, but man, for a Penn State tight end, only 35 targets, 26 receptions, 257 yards. Never found the end zone once last year. Now, granted, Penn State fell apart in the second half of the season, so that's part of it. Yeah. But even then, he just wasn't putting up anything up until that point. But you have to think he still believes in James Franklin, so he's going to go to Virginia Tech. And if he understands the system well enough, there's always the potential of a Tyler Warren-esque season. Do I think that's going to happen? Absolutely not. But you never know, right?
Yeah, potential's there.
The potential's there. So I'll probably invest in him again this year. These other guys are all super interesting. I'll touch on Brody Foley and Dorian Thomas because, man, they're in the exact same bucket. They were elite tight ends for CFF last year. They were great tight end 4 and 7. As I said, they're both moving up in competition, which is already a questionable choice in and of itself, at least for CFF perspective. The problem is they're also both walking into situations where the incumbent tight end is still hanging around. For Foley, he's going to Louisville. Jaleel Skinner is still hanging around, and that's a receiving tight end as well. So that's a problem for him. Dorian Thomas headed to Cal. I was excited about this because I was under the impression that Mason Minnie was moving on. He is not, though. Mason Minnie, who was a top 12 tight end last year, is still hanging around. So now we have two former top 12 tight ends for CFF now in the same room. That's got to make you cry if you're in a dynasty or a C2C league and you're holding on to either one of these guys. You're just sitting there being like, come on. You're going to eat into each other a ton. We already saw with Louisville last year when they got 2 tight ends, they're going to feed both of them. Skidder and Kariski both got around 28 to 30 targets each. I very much see that happening again there at Louisville. And Dorian Thomas there at Cal having 2 receiving tight ends is obviously great for JKS, but for those guys, man, it could turn into such a mess between the two of those guys. You got any extra thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I was diving into where Dorian Thomas's production ultimately came from when he for New Mexico, and 77 of his targets, so 40.26% came from playing below the sticks. So it was a lot of tight end screens, a lot of design dump offs, being the bailout for New Mexico is what he was used as. 31% of his target share came below the line of scrimmage. So he wasn't this field stretching tight end. They're bringing in Jordan Somerville as the offensive coordinator from the Bucs. So he's coming in from the NFL, looking to maybe lead a more pass focused, quarterback focused, inline offense, which is gonna be middle of the field usage for JKS, and that's a positive thing for Dorian Thomas and Mason Minnie. I don't think he repeats the production that he had at New Mexico, but if he is used more in the intermediate range of the field and not used so much below the sticks, there's good opportunity for Dorian Thomas to take hold of the tight end 1 position for Cal. It's just not something that I really want to bet on too much. And then for Foley, I don't know what it's going to be with Jaleel Skinner there. Like you said, with Nate Kursky, 57 targets, 356 yards, 4 touchdowns in 2024. Mark Redmond, 31 targets, 239 yards. So the tight ends in the system are primarily outlets and safety valves. I don't think I'll have too much Foley in this case, but I'll be okay in investing a little bit in Dorian Thomas.
What about Walker Lyons here? Definitely one of the bigger wildcard tight end transfers, in my opinion, because as a backup tight end, he was pretty solid for USC last year. 26 targets, 20 catches, 223 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Not, world beater by any stretch of the imagination, but for a backup tight end, that's a pretty solid amount of production there. He's now headed to BYU, who we've seen over the last couple of years when they feel that they have a dude at tight end, they're willing to feed him, right? Carson Ryan this past year, 59 targets, 45 catches, 620 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He was tight end 25 on the year. And then you go back 2 years before that, Isaac Rex, 60 targets, 34 catches, 422 yards, and 3 touchdowns there as well. Nothing elite, but a very safe bet at tight end. So my question is, Chris, did USC see what Walker Lyons was doing there at USC and think, let's grab him, let's plug him right into what we were having Carson Ryan do last year? Or do you think this ends up being a little bit of fool's gold here?
I like the play. Can you see that 50+ targets? That's really the baseline for a fantasy relevant tight end, like you mentioned. But I think he's more athletic, and he's going to be better than what Keanu Hill was in 2024, which is the tight end that only saw 24 targets. Isaac Rex 2023 saw 60. And then you mentioned Carson Ryan, who saw 43 targets. If he can get right in the middle and get that 50 target range, Walker Lyon can be productive, highly recruited. So the talent's there. I'm okay chasing a little bit of the ceiling of Walker Lyon at the position at BYU, man.
Trying to take a look, because the other thing I'm kind of thinking of is the fact that Carson Ryan, no, he's pretty even with his targets throughout. I was wondering if it was one of those scenarios where he kind of was built up throughout the season because he was new to the system last year. Did it take him a while to kind of get going? Relatively even for the most part. Obviously, in the bowl game against Texas Tech, he had 10 targets, which very much inflated his numbers there at the end of the season. But hopefully Lyons, again, being a former 4-star tight end there, maybe he can hit the ground running. Last guy we'll touch on here, Houston Thomas out of UTSA, going to Texas A&M. On one hand, I want to be excited about this, but on the other hand, I don't know, man. It just kind of feels like a little bit of an unfortunate landing spot.
Yeah, I'm the same. I just don't think the role is going to exist at Texas A&M for him to be a fantasy productive tight end. Given that Marcel Reed was top 25 in pass attempts, it just wasn't an offense that funneled to the tight end position. So I'm not excited for the landing spot, and I don't think I'm going to be investing too much into Houston Thomas this year.
The one saving grace that I could see.
Oh,
well, never mind. Nope, I'm a liar.
There is no saving grace.
No saving grace. I keep feeling like Casey Concepcion was a slot receiver last year, but he wasn't. He was outside. It was Craver who was in the slot. Because I was going to say, if Casey Concepcion being gone opens up a lot of over the middle targets, then maybe those could be funneled to Houston Thomas instead. But no, Craver's still out there. Maybe they move Craver to the outside. I don't know. We'll find out as the spring ball kind of goes along. Maybe that's the saving grace of Houston Thomas. But for the most part, I'm sitting here being like, I don't really know. Don't really like it. Some other guys I want to touch on really, really quickly. Oklahoma completely revamps their tight end room here, right? You have Hayden Hansen coming in from Florida. They got Rocky Beers out of Colorado State. Rocky Beers was a big tight end for CFF, especially down the stretch last year. They also bring in Jack Van Dorislayer. I definitely pronounced that incorrectly, but both On3 and 247 have him rated as the highest tight end that they're bringing in, even though he did jack squat last year. I don't know what's going on there with the recruiting services. They have some weird rankings in the transfer portal rankings. But anyway, we do know that Ben Arkball, last year we saw a little bit of targeting of the tight end position. And then we saw it in the last year at Washington State as well. He started to use the tight end a little bit more in recent years. Are you willing to take the shot on any of those guys potentially next year? What do you think?
Beers on a Saturday night in Oklahoma. Doesn't sound much better than that, man. But I think I'm going to roll with Rocky Beers out of the group. He kind of has the same build, same athletic profile as Jared Knack last year from Oklahoma. If he can fit into that role, if he jumps right into that role that Knack left behind, then I'm going to be investing nicely into Rocky Beers. 52% slot rate last season, 63.2 slot usage over his final 3 games. He's a receiving tight end, and again, if he can find that role, if he can be that guy for Oklahoma, then the upside for Rocky Beers to be a back end tight end one, a top end tight end two for fantasy managers, that's where I'd like to put my money out of the three guys there.
I want to go with Beers, but I have to take note of the fact that guys who transfer within the SEC usually end up doing pretty well. And Hayden Hanson's exactly doing that. He's coming from Florida, 47 targets last year, 30 catches. Not very efficient, only 8.3 yards per catch. Easily his worst year so far in his career, at least in terms of efficiency. Yards per route run was an abysmal 0.81 last year. So maybe he's just on the downtrend of his career. And, maybe I should be careful with that. But, I'm just keeping an eye on that there. Ole Miss bringing in Brady Prescore out of Michigan, also bringing in Michael Smith out of South Carolina. They're overhauling their tight end room as well. Javante Connor, tight end out of East Carolina, going to Vanderbilt. Obviously, Vanderbilt is in need of replacing Eli Stowers. That might be interesting to me, except for, again, jumping up in competition. Stowers very much feels like they fed him because he was the best weapon they had, not because that's what the system really demanded. And then we also got Hunter Welsing coming in from Northwestern Ohio State. I'm not super excited about that. The services seem very excited, but I think Welsing's like the top 3 tight end and for both 247 and on 3 in terms of the transfer portal. But I don't know. I feel like Ohio State will kind of spread it around quite a bit this upcoming year. What do you think of any of those guys interesting to you, Chris?
Yeah, Welsing actually is a little bit interesting to me because of Arthur Smith coming in as the offensive coordinator at Ohio State and the history that he has of putting tight ends on the field. In 2024, he was
is
ranked
Welsing going to be the tight end 3?
Yeah, maybe. But 2024 ranked first in 13 personnel, which is 3 tight ends on the field. 2025 ranked 14th in 12 personnel, 2 tight ends on the field. The Steelers ran the second highest rate of 13 personnel last season. The dude loves his tight ends, and he loves his undersized tight ends, especially around the goal line. So he could see a season where he gets 6-7 touchdowns. The yardage isn't that great, and the targets aren't really there for him, but him finding the end zone could be a thing on that offense. So there is some promise there. And then Javante Connor, to me, it's really going to come down to who's saucing the rock for Vanderbilt. Is it going to be the 5-star Jared Curtis, who looks great at the high school level, but coming in starting possibly for Vanderbilt week 1 in the SEC? That's going to be something to watch. But again, athletic guy, kind of fits the same profile of Eli Stowers. History of the usage at the tight end is there. So those 2 guys are interesting for Prescore and Smith. They haven't given us anything to really be excited for at their previous programs. Smith, a lot of issues, left. I think he left the program halfway through the year. Mm-hmm. He was going to commit to Syracuse. Then he considered going back to South Carolina. Then he ultimately flipped to Ole Miss. So it's not a talent thing. It's just going to be a usage thing. And I don't think I'm going to be using either one of these 2 tight ends on my fantasy teams.
No, it definitely feels like a situation where you're going to probably want to see which one of them breaks out in the middle of the season, if either one of them does.
Waiver targets at best.
Yeah. All right. We're going to throw it over to another quick ad break if you're listening to this on the Campus Again Podcast Network. Otherwise, we will see you guys in just 1 second. All right. And we are back. Chris, so let's go ahead and hit up some of these FCS players. This is always fun every year because these are all guys that, I'm a pretty big college football diehard. I don't watch a ton of FCS. Mostly I'll do that whenever it is the only game that is on. But, it is fun kind of diving into these guys, kind of taking a look and seeing like who people consider like the big ones moving up from the FCS level to the FBS level. And it is interesting how quickly, like when I start putting these guys together, how much I don't necessarily disagree with like, the services, but in terms of us, right, we're looking for guys that are going to be instant impact guys. And so That's what I try to focus on when choosing the players we'll talk about here today. I think the quarterbacks, we got 5 quarterbacks here that are super interesting. The running backs are pretty interesting for the most part. Wide receivers, things actually get really dicey really quickly, which is kind of surprising to me. I feel like that would be just blindly, I think that would be the position that we would see the most impact year one, and maybe we still do, but as of right now, it doesn't seem very clear. Chris, I guess your general thoughts on the FCS pool this year, or what was your general thoughts as you're researching everything?
There's some nice running backs that if they could find a role early in the year can maybe take over the running back room of the teams that they're on. Quarterbacks, there's maybe one. I got maybe 1 or 2 guys that I think it could hit early, and then wide receivers, it's going to be a toss up. A lot of these guys, though, diving into them, are going to be drafted. I'm going to be drafting in the Sickos draft, where we take out the top 250 ADP players and then draft with what's left. And I think a lot of these guys are going to be on my short list. So excited to see what some of these guys are going to do, but I'm not overly hyped for the fantasy production for a lot of them.
All right, well, let's start with our quarterbacks here. I'll go ahead and list off the 5 quarterbacks we'll be discussing here today, and that is Jaden Craig, quarterback out of Harvard, headed to TCU. We also have Matt Vesa, the quarterback formerly of New Hampshire, headed to Ohio. We have Marcus Stokes, the quarterback out of West Florida, headed to Memphis. We have Mason McKenzie, the quarterback out of Saginaw Valley State, headed to Boston College. And then finally, we will finish up with EJ Colson, former quarterback out of UCF, went down to Incarnate Word for a year, now headed back up to the CUSA there at UTEP. So, Chris, let's start with Jaden Craig. For those that have even remotely begun doing their CFF research so far this year, I think Jaden Craig is probably the name that those people would be familiar with, mostly because we see Josh Hoover leave TCU. We know that's the system we like for CFF. We immediately start thinking, all right, who's going to replace him there? And Craig was a guy that I think a lot of people kind of came across pretty early, right? Pretty solid at Harvard last year in 11 games, 344 passing attempts, 2,884 passing yards, 25 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Really solid for the Harvard Crimson last year. He has a little bit of rushing to him, about 150 yards last year, 3 touchdowns. So he's mobile-ish. Definitely not a guy, though, that you would be sitting there thinking he'll hit 500 rushing yards by the end of the season here. I think that he's going to end up winning this job. Yes, Adam Schobel, the true freshman there last year, he's going into his second year here. Yes, he's got the recruiting pedigree here. Very intriguing recruit. I know a lot of people drafted him in freshman drafts last year.
Yep.
But I don't think that TCU goes out and grabs one of the best FCS quarterbacks in this portal without thinking that he's got, at the very least, this is going to be like I say this, I don't think this would be the end result, but I do think that at the very least, there's going to be at least some level of competition here, right? Because I think Schobel still has the upside just because of the recruiting pedigree there. But Craig, I think, absolutely can come in and fit this system super well here. Very much just like a plug-and-play option just to keep TCU afloat until Schobel is ready. Maybe that's this year. Maybe it's a whole year from now. We'll have to be sure. But if he is starting, I think that he has a very solid upside. Like, again, Sonny Dykes last couple years has been great. Gordon Samus, the new offensive coordinator who's coming in from UConn, he just made Joe Fagnano a CFF quarterback last year. That is a very impressive feat in and of itself right there. So I don't have Craig super high in my rankings, mostly because, again, he's jumping up so much in competition here. There is that little bit of competition between him and Schobel, but I think he'll end up winning this job, and I think he's a solid, like, quarterback 5-6 play for you in drafts. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I hit the nail on the head there. For me, I'm going into the season under the impression that it's Schobel's job to lose, and competition at is going to breed some good play out of both of them. So if Schobel doesn't start right away and it is Jaden Craig and TCU struggles and then they want to see what Schobel can do and Schobel comes in halfway, or if Schobel starts, I don't see a full season of production for Jaden Craig unless he comes in and just absolutely kills it for TCU. So my excitement level on a scale of 10 is probably a 3 for Jaden Craig coming into the year. He has a limited rushing profile, but I'm not overly hyped up for what he's going to be at TCU, man.
Let's talk about a guy that I think is probably on the out of 5 for the excitement level for us, given the fact that before we even started recording this show, you and I were talking to each other and saying, like, bro, have you looked into this guy? Like, this is actually kind of super interesting. Matt Veza, quarterback, again, formerly of New Hampshire, going to Ohio. In 13 games last year, 375 pass attempts for 2,674 yards and 19 touchdowns. He also had 138 rushing attempts for 750 yards and 8 touchdowns last year. Ohio is in need of an overhaul, right? We lose Brian Smith, the head coach. They promote the defensive coordinator to head coach, which sounded bad at first, but then they promoted the quarterback's coach to be the new offensive coordinator. They're keeping everything in-house. You have to imagine that means they're going to try to be running the same thing. And given the fact they went out and got Matt Veza here, who is very much a dual-threat quarterback here, they're going to be trying to run a similar system next year. Is that going to be successful? We're going to find out, but given what we're seeing here, I'm going to be drafting quite a bit of Veza, I think. I think that this is going to be a very high upside play for the most part. Definitely, like, once you get out of the top, 36 quarterbacks, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't take a shot at a guy here who could end up rushing for 600-700 plus rushing yards. Given what they've done with Navarro the last couple of years, they know how to use a dual threat quarterback. This has to be, in my opinion, actually, looking at everybody on this list for FCS players this year, I think he is the most exciting FCS to FBS really just player in general this year for me.
Yep. The 138 rush attempts is just so succulent, especially going onto a team like Ohio, where we saw Parker Navarro pretty much put up the same kind of rushing totals. He's got a ton of passing work, 19 pass TDs. The offense should be rolling the same, like you mentioned. I am very excited for Matt Veza moving up from New Hampshire to Ohio. It's him and EJ Colson for me on this list as the two guys who could see the potential starting volume and start at the beginning of the year for their new teams. The other guys, I just don't see them starting right away.
Oh, it's a little out of order, but since you're so excited to talk about EJ Colson, let's go ahead and touch on him here, Chris. Why don't you tell us about why you're so excited about him?
Yeah, like you mentioned, he's gone from what, UCF, you said?
Yes, sir.
UCF, Incarnate Word, back up to UTEP. His completion percentage is tremendous, 70% completion percentage, 16 TDs to 4 interceptions. So he is safe with the ball. The dual threat ability is there, 83 rush attempts, 3 rushing touchdowns, and the job is wide open at UTEP. Skylar Locklier's gone. Locklear. Malachi Nelson is gone. There's another quarterback that transferred out. EJ Colson's going to have all the opportunity to take this starting role at UTEP and run with it literally and figuratively. So between him and Veza, I think I'm going to have quite a few shares of both these guys on my fantasy teams.
I definitely would take the shot on Colson, especially really late in drafts. I think there is a lot of upside here. Like you said, almost 458 rushing yards last year, 3 touchdowns. Very much strikes me as less designed quarterback runs and more of just really good scrambler here. The thing that I think people need to...
It's no 138, but it's good.
Yeah. We're not talking about Veza here where that ran for almost 140 times in a season here. But even still, 86 rush attempts in 10 games is nothing to sleep on there at all. Nope. And the other thing that you shouldn't sleep on at all is, a lot of people hear us talk about UTEP. They're like, oh my God, what are we doing here? You talk about UTEP, right? Don't sleep on UTEP as a potential fantasy spot last year. Week 8 and on, Skylar Locklear. Chris, I don't know if you're looking at my show sheet or not, but top blank, Skylar Locklear was second half of the season.
Top 15.
Top 10 quarterback for CFF second half of the season last year.
Love that.
Second half of the season, 34.24 fantasy points, 22.1, 37.96, 22.6, 24.94, and 29.02. That's how he finished his year. Just one of the safest quarterback plays you could have played last year. I have to imagine there's a lot of people out there last year that were getting into the playoffs. They saw the team across from them start Skylar Locklear, and they're sitting there being like, "Oh, this is a piece of cake. I got this." And this, if this dummy's out here starting a UTEP quarterback, I got this in the back. Boom! This man was one of the safest quarterbacks in the playoffs last year. He was
so fast.
Great.
Yep.
So I absolutely think that, if Colson is even just as mobile as Locklear was last year, which his numbers suggest that he can be, I think we could get something similar. The only problem is UTEP going to take a while to get going like it did last year, right? Because Locklear, yes, he was top 10 second half of the year, but overall he was QB 77 on the year because it took UTEP just so long to get going. So we'll see. Again, Colson's not going to be going very high in a lot of drafts. I cannot imagine that he is going to be. So very much could quickly become one of your favorite, QB 6-7s off the board kind of deal.
Absolutely. Yep.
Let's talk about the other two quarterbacks on this page here. Marcus Stokes, quarterback out of West Florida, headed over to Memphis last year for West Florida in 12 games, 3,297 passing yards, easily the most successful passing quarterback among the 5 options here we have on this page. 30 passing touchdowns, 13 interceptions. He also had 367 yards on the ground and 10 scores. So again, doesn't strike me as a guy they're designing runs for, but clearly is mobile enough, and especially around the goal line. They seem like he got him a lot of work down there. He's headed over here to Memphis. He'll need to battle former blue chip quarterback Aaron Noland. But the thing that is most exciting here is not the fact that he is going to work with Charles Huff, who is the head coach, but the offensive coordinator that Huff brings in is Kevin Decker, the former offensive coordinator at Old Dominion, who has been responsible for Colton Joseph's incredible years the last couple of years. Like I said,
great point.
I don't think Stokes is going to be a dual threat quarterback in the way that Joseph was. Like, Joseph's a guy you're designing runs for. Stokes doesn't strike me as that. But I do think that they're going to use him around the goal line if they know that is part of his skill set there, and that can raise a pretty good floor in terms of touchdown numbers there. We also know Huff does kind of like to air it out with his quarterbacks a little bit. So I like Stokes. I think, again, if he's still available as my 5th, 6th quarterback off the board, I'm willing to take a couple shots throughout the season there. What are your thoughts, Chris?
Stokes is an interesting one. The talent's there, but how much has he grown up as an individual? He was highly recruited, as we all know, D2 Heisman finalist, had that big controversy. The pass work is there for him to create. The rush attempts are there. Like you mentioned, 82, 10 rushing touchdowns. He's going into Memphis to battle Aaron Noland. I like the possibility of him in that offense with the former Old Dominion coaching staff there as the OC. So I'll take some shots on Stokes if he, I'll take more shots on Stokes if he's named starter for Memphis, and I'm drafting, summer and into fall. But early drafts, it's going to be hard for me to invest in Stokes. But it's interesting profile.
I have not taken a look at where Stokes is going to fall in my early projections, but again, as you kind of said, there's quarterbacks is probably going to be one of the most diverse positions I'll have this year, especially with those last 3 out of, I normally take about 6 quarterbacks in a 30-round draft. So, those I see myself drafting a lot of the same guys with those top 3 picks and then really diversifying with my back 3 picks at quarterback.
Yep.
I think Stokes is definitely going to fall into that back half 3, and just every once in a while, if I kind of feel like it, I'll take a shot at him kind of deal. This last one is so interesting to me. And that's Mason McKenzie, the former quarterback out of Saginaw Valley State, headed over to Boston College. In 11 games last year, 2,086 passing yards, 17 touchdowns. That's not super great. But man, Chris, we were just gushing over Vesa and his 138 rush attempts. This man had 159 rush attempts in 11 games last year for 942 rushing yards, 10 touchdowns, just running all over his conference down there.
Yeah.
I don't get Bill O'Brien. I don't get him at all. He's already shown he does not know how to use this kind of rushing quarterback with Thomas Castellanos. And again, yes, Boston College needs somebody, right? They lose Dylan Lonergan. He's transferring out. Grayson James is also done out of eligibility here. Even their third string quarterback transferred out in Shaker Razig here. Like, cleaned house. Complete clean house room there. But this is a really big jump for McKenzie here, headed up to the ACC here. We also got Grayson Wilson, a former 4-star quarterback coming in from Arkansas who didn't really do anything last year. So, again, a wide open room here for Boston College. Do we trust this coaching staff, which, by the way, doesn't have an offensive coordinator right now? Because Will Lawing just got hired to the Chicago Bears. They don't even know who their offensive coordinator is going to be. What are we doing here, Chris?
I'm probably not touching Mason McKenzie at all. Knowing Billy O'B's history of putting people in the doghouse, Mason McKenzie, the rushing profile is great and all, but he's just too frivolous with the ball for me. 17 career interceptions, 10 career fumbles. He's a guy that puts the ball in the ground or in the other team's hands quite a bit. And if those struggles move up with him to Boston College, I don't see a full season of Mason McKenzie as the starter for BC this year, man. So I'm not gonna be touching Mason McKenzie, or as for the most part, I'm not gonna be touching Boston College offense as a whole. Maybe outside of some Evan Dickens, man.
I think that's the big problem, is that Boston College could be just an absolute dumpster fire this year.
Fire.
And it's just like, you just don't want any part of that, which is very unfortunate again for Evan Dickens owners, but otherwise, like, yeah, this just spells disaster. Let's move on to running backs, though. Again, I'll run through these 5 guys real quick, a little teaser of who we'll talk about. We got CJ Miller, the running back out of Mercer, headed to Toledo. We got Ahmed Miller, the running back out of Jackson State, headed to Syracuse. We have Latrell Morrell, the running back out of West Georgia, headed to Kennesaw State. And we got James Jones, the running back out of Delaware State, headed to New Mexico State. And then finally, we got LJ Phillips Jr., the running back out of South Dakota, just monstrous year at South Dakota last year, headed to Iowa. Just in general, I think there's one guy on here that I feel pretty solid about. The rest, it's like, theoretically, this could be really fun. I just need some things to fall my way here. Yeah. The last 2 guys especially, there's some crowded rooms they got to work through there, but could be fun. Let's start with CJ Miller here, running back out of Mercer. I think this is the most straightforward one. Right, Miller is following his head coach Mike Jacobs from Mercer to Toledo. He was the RB1 for Jacobs and Mercer last year with 170 attempts in 13 games, 947 yards, and 14 touchdowns there. Jacobs, if you look back through his history, is a guy that tends to reward running backs the more years that they are with him. And so I actually see Miller potentially outproducing what he did last year at Toledo, at least in terms of volume. Again, we'll see if the production takes a hit or the efficiency takes a hit, because we are moving up in competition a little bit here. But also the good news is, moving from the FCS to the MAC is probably the least bad jump that you can get when it comes to that. So I'm hoping we get that again. I'm hoping we see he had 27 targets last year. I'm hoping we see that again here. Very much could prove to be a really solid running back for CFF. Like I said, I think he is the most straightforward guy. Your biggest competition is Corey Smith coming in from Penn State. Didn't do much at Penn State, but you know how these blue chips tend to spark out in the MAC sometimes out of nowhere. So that's my one caveat. But Chris, do you agree with me? This one's pretty straightforward for the most part.
Yeah, CJ Miller has the size profile, big missed tackles force guy. Over 50% of his yardage came after contact. He's gonna fit right into what Toledo's gonna want to do in the rush game. So I'm excited for CJ Miller at Toledo, man.
All right, like I said, I think that was the most straightforward one. Let's get weird here real quick. Ahmad Miller, running back out of Jackson. Oh my God, let me try that again. Ahmad Miller, running back out of Jackson State, headed to Syracuse. I can speak English, I promise, guys. Really solid year for Jackson State last year. 167 attempts, 1,000 yards, or 1,040 yards, 6 touchdowns. A little bit of receiving work, 5 catches for 26 yards, no touchdowns there. This is a wide open Syracuse room, right?
Yep.
Yassine Willis gone to Kansas, as we discussed a couple weeks ago. Will Nixon, even though, even though his father's still the offensive coordinator. Will Nixon is out of eligibility. Completely wide open room. Tyreek Hill is the RB3 from last year. He had 24 carries, 129 yards, so no slouch, but that'd be a big jump for him. And you also got Juwan Johnson coming in from LSU, a former 4-star guy, 40 carries last year for the Tigers, 177 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's my biggest concern there. But we do know, as we saw with Yassine Willis, as well as, God dang it, I'm blanking on the running back from the year before.
I want to say Will Nixon, but that's not right.
It's not Will Nixon. Oh my God, we're professionals, y'all. We are professionals. 2024. Oh, LaQuint Allen. How could I forget LaQuinta in? As we saw the year before, if they got a dude, they're willing to ride him. Now, that's a lot to ask of an FCS transfer coming up here for him to earn the job so much that they're going to give him 228 carries, which is not something he even did at the FCS level. But definitely somebody I'm keeping an eye on just because he did well at Jackson State last year. This room's wide open. Chris, your general thoughts?
I don't have much general thoughts on Ahmad Miller here. Like you said, the room is wide open, so the opportunity is going to be there. There's no real receiving prowess for me, so he's not going to be involved too much in the pass game. He's going to need volume in the first couple downs. He's going to need to have that role on this offense in order to be productive for fantasy. Not great at missing, not great at forcing missed tackles either. He averages 1 missed tackle for every 3.1 attempts, so he's just not gonna create fantasy points for me. And when I'm drafting back end running backs on my to fill up my running back room, I want a guy that could see a good amount of targets, or I want a guy that could see a good amount of the field or create after contact. Give me that yardage, which ultimately equals fantasy points, and that's what we're chasing when we're playing this game. So Ahmad Miller, I'm excited because the running back room is wide open, but his creativity just doesn't do it for me. So it's going to be a no for me, dog.
Okay, so you're just going to avoid the Syracuse running back room in general then is what I'm kind of hearing, at least for draft season?
Early draft season, I'll probably, we're drafting in spring. We're drafting our early best balls. I'm probably just going to not focus on the Syracuse running back room. But as you move into summer and fall and things kind of clear up for us, and we do get a guy that stands out in this room, then yeah, I will have some shares. I just don't know if it's going to be Ahmad Miller. I can't see it being Ahmad Miller.
What about Latrell Morrell here, running back out of West Georgia, head over to Kennesaw State. This past year, West Georgia, 179 rushing attempts for 912 yards and 3 touchdowns. Touchdown numbers are obviously not super great there, but he does have the receiving work that you like to see there. Chris, 32 targets, 22 catches, 241 yards, and 4 touchdowns through the air. So he actually had more touchdowns through the air than he did on the ground. What I'm kind of interested in here is that who he's kind of coming in here to replace. Because Coleman Bennett last year had himself a pretty solid number of games, especially in the second half of the season. He kind of got hurt in the middle of it, so it's kind of hard to tell, at least in my opinion, those were like just flashes in the pan, or if it was just a breakout that was kind of cut short and then he kind of came back a little bit at the end. It's really hard to tell. But we do know that the veer and shoot system, which Kennesaw State is now running, affectionately known as the veer and hoot, it is known to produce some great running backs for CFF, right? They do tend to actually have more workhorse loads than a lot of other systems, right? Because they're so fast-paced. They want to keep the same guy out there, and they're trying to run the ball down your throat and then hit you over the top, right? So that tends to lead to some more workhorse backs. So that's something to keep an eye on for. And this is another running back room that pretty much cleared out after last year, right? Everybody except for Alexander Diggs, who was the RB3 last year, 71 carries. He's still around, so that's somebody to watch out for here. But Latrell Murray, again, coming up from the FCS to the CUSA, not a huge jump in competition. I mean, the CUSA is now more and more being made up of former FCS programs here. I think that, including Kennesaw State, I think that Morrell is definitely a guy that I'll be keeping an eye out for, like early spring reports, see if he is clearly taking that RB1 job or if, they say something different. What do you think, Chris?
I like Morel. Out of the 5, he was, he's number 2 for me on this list if I'm ranking them. He's a highly rated pass blocker with a decent enough receiving profile. 11 yards per reception with a 1.1 average depth of target is what you want to see. He's creating when he gets the ball in his hands, either from design screens or dump offs to the running back. And one upside thing, at least for week 1, is he plays West Georgia. Kennesaw State plays West Georgia week 1. So at the very least, you'll get that 1 week of elite usage out of him as he gives an L to his old team. So the receiving profile is something that I like to see with these guys. And there's a pathway to fantasy production because of that. He's no slouch, getting the handoffs either. So if we could see a role where Morel is on the field for all 3 downs, because he has that receiving profile and he's decent enough with the ball in his hands out of the backfield, he could be a dark horse heading into the 2026 season, man.
And this is an offense that absolutely does like to use their running backs out of the backfield. I mean, Coleman Bennett had 33 targets last year. Even Alexander Diggs, who's RB3, had 12 targets. So again, they're using their guys, and that whole receiver room just got decimated by the portal. So I have to imagine they're going to have to get creative with who they're throwing their balls around to. So speaking of getting creative, let's take a look at James Jones here, the running back formerly of Delaware State, headed to New Mexico State. This is a very interesting guy. He's very high on a lot of rankings in terms of like transfer portal rankings, and I get why. Right, he had 100 rush attempts last year, which doesn't sound like a lot, but he didn't need a lot because he had 924 rush yards last year. He's ripping off 9.2 yards per attempt, 11 touchdowns, just explosive play after explosive play. Just the advanced stats here are nuts. 6.28 yards after contact per attempt, 68.2% breakaway percentage. Like, it's absolutely insane. But the problem is he was RB3 for his team last year. And he could very well be that again this year because Dijon Stanley returns from New Mexico State. He was the RB2 last year for them. You got Terrell Washington coming in from Iowa. 2 guys that I think will present a problem here. The only way you get super excited about this, in my opinion, is if you start hearing that Jones is just blowing everybody out of the water. Like that when he was playing at Delaware State, he was playing well below his level of competition. And if he goes to New Mexico State, maybe he still is playing below his level of competition. But I feel like if that was the case, he might have transferred up even higher than New Mexico State. It's intriguing. I'm definitely not touching this early on, though.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. The guy's nearly producing 1 fantasy point per touch, which is outrageous with his 9.2 yards per attempt. Again, no receiving profile, so that's going to cap his usage on the offense. If he can make that part of his game, then, he can be the lead guy for New Mexico State. But not having that receiving profile going into what could potentially be a crowded running back room, I think his fantasy outlook is going to be capped by that. So pessimistically I can't even say the word. I'm not optimistic to put it that way.
Last guy here, in my opinion, in a similar vein, but it honestly hurts even just a little bit more because of just how awesome this guy was last year in the FCS level. But L.J. Phillips Jr., running back out of South Dakota, just an unreal year last year. 295 rush attempts for nearly 2,000 yards and 19 rushing touchdowns. 42 targets, 29 receptions, 202 yards, and another touchdown through the air. Granted, this was in 15 games, so these numbers are a little inflated because of that. Regardless, even if you put this at a 12-game sample size, you're still looking at an absolute monster year from him.
Ridiculous.
He could have gone to so many places, been the RB1, clearly one of the most exciting FCS transfers this year. Of course, he has to go to Iowa, where there's already a pretty crowded room with Kamari Moulton still hanging around, Xavier Williams hanging around. Like, Jason Patterson and Terrell Washington, they're gone, man, but like, he couldn't have gone somewhere where he couldn't have gone to a MAC school, couldn't have gone to some G5 school, or even a Power 4 school that is very clearly needed a workhorse back. Man, this one just hurts a little bit because like I want to be excited by this, and I even double checked. I'm like, okay, did Kamari Moulton leave? Did he go to did he transfer? And Iowa just needs a new guy. No, the major players are still there for Iowa, unfortunately, and that really kind of kills the excitement for Phillips.
Yeah, yeah. Just an exciting player to watch. When I was going through the list, I know VP's brought him up as well a couple times. Just going through the list of the running backs that were on the show sheet here, and I was looking into his profile. It's just highlight after highlight. 1,272 yards after contact is
God,
just outrageous. 82 missed tackles forced last year. He's got the receiving profile, 42 targets. The guy is a pinball when you're watching him play football. Like you mentioned, the Iowa landing spot isn't the greatest situation, but we saw Kamari Moulton kind of struggle coming out the gate last year. And if that's the case and LJ Phillips pops for Iowa, we could definitely see a situation where he ends up taking that role as RB1 for the Hawkeyes. But it's just going to be one of those situations that, at least ADP wise, it's going to be interesting to watch through draft season, because he could be that running back that gets, drafted early in February, March, kind of fades out as news comes in going into April and May. And then as draft season really starts to kick in and we get into the summer and fall months, his ADP could do another swing and come right back up because of the player that he is and the profile that he has. Out of the five, I mean, I'm going to be owning the most LJ Phillips between the rest of these guys here.
see, I think I'll be mostly owning CJ Miller again because that is so easy to project there. But I guess I'll ask you, Chris. So it's then just LJ Phillips or bust for you when it comes to this Iowa running back room because of what you saw Moulton do last year. You're not going to draft any Moulton. You're just going to bet on it's either LJ Phillips breaks out or this is going to be a mess, and I don't want any of them. Am I reading you correctly?
I'll draft anyone if the value's there. But if I'm going to put a bet, if I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to hitch my way into this running back in the Iowa room, and I'm only going to own this running back out of the Iowa room, for me, because of what he's done, I know it's at South Dakota, but because of what he's done and how much he just pops when you watch him, I'm going to hitch it to LJ Phillips, man. If he's my running back 4 or 5, or I'm rounding out my running back room, I'm going to take the chance on the guy that just put up, 2,000 rush yards, who's, a missed tackle machine, who can catch the ball out of the backfield as well. If we see a situation on Iowa where he's on the field for all 3 downs, this guy could be an absolute killer.
Alrighty, let's move on to our wide receivers and finish up here with these FCS transfer guys. And as I kind of mentioned earlier, wide receiver just in general feels like the spot where a lot of these guys can come in, make immediate impacts. We saw it last year, like Cooper Barkate was fantastic at Duke. There's been other guys in the past couple of years that have really popped immediately coming up from the FCS level at wide receiver. You can imagine my disappointment when I'm looking at a lot of these top-end guys, and man, I just really don't like, really outside of one guy on this list here, I don't really like the landing spot for any of these guys. And so, I looked through a lot of different guys, really kind of try to pick at guys that really seemed like they could pop in year one. And these are the best 5 I could come up with, and I really don't like most of these guys, except for this first guy. I'll run through the 5 real quick, though. Josiah Rockwell, the wide receiver out of Prairie View A&M. He is headed to Western Kentucky. That's the guy that I like the most. We also got Nico Brown, the wide receiver out of Yale, headed to Stanford. We got Jalen Jones, the wide receiver out of Alabama State, headed to Texas Tech. We got Jared Richardson, the wide receiver out of UPenn, headed to Duke. And then we got Carver Cheeks, wide receiver out of Northern Colorado, headed to UTEP. So, again, let's start off positively here. Let's talk about Josiah Rockwell here. Last year, in 14 games, 107 targets, 75 receptions for 1,158 yards and 8 touchdowns. That's already pretty great. The fact that he is going to the CUSA is also pretty great. The fact that he's going to a team in Western Kentucky that has made an absolute business out of grabbing wide receivers from the FCS level and turning them into their wide receiver ones the last couple of years cannot be ignored, right? 2 years ago, Keyshawn Johnson came in, 105 targets in 14 games, 931 yards, 7 touchdowns. Last year, it was Matthew Henry, came in, 13 games, 88 targets, 888 yards, and 6 touchdowns. This is Western Kentucky's style. They've done it again. They're going and grabbing one of the top wide receivers out of the FCS here in Rockwell. I really see them doing it again here. This is easily, in my opinion, one of the easier to project wide receivers for these FCS transfers. My biggest problem, though, is that in the last couple of years, Western Kentucky hasn't had their second outside wide receiver come back and has really cleared the path for these FCS transfers to come in and be the clear number one guy. That's not the case this year. Musa Berry's coming back this year. He was the number 2 outside wide receiver last year behind Matthew Henry. He has 65 targets, though, 35 catches, 507 yards, and a touchdown. No slouch whatsoever. He very much could end up being the wide receiver 1. So Rockwell will stay in the back half of drafts for me for sure, unlike last year where I got pretty invested in Matthew Henry, kind of had him go. I sort of drafted him pretty high towards the end.
Yep.
But both Berry and Rockwell, I think, will be guys that I'm drafted a little bit later this year. But of the 5 guys here, I think Rockwell is my most exciting guy. What about you, Chris? And then besides him, you can pick the next guy we talk about that you think's the second most exciting.
I like that's a good question. I kind of like Carver Cheeks, Northern Colorado to
Carver
UTEP.
what now?
Cheeks. Carver Cheeks. Big contested catch guy, 48.
Chris, this is a family show.
Sorry. I didn't say okay, I'll keep it at that. 48.3% reception percentage on 29 contested catch attempts. It's a decimated wide receiver room, just like the quarterback room. We mentioned E.J. Colson, highly efficient, accurate quarterback. If Carver Cheeks is that contested catch wide receiver for UTEP, there's a possibility where we see a decent amount of production. A lot of the guys, he's going to be a guy that I'm going to have on my short list for these FCS wide receivers that are moving up. I like the Rockwell pick, Jared. Another highly contested catch rate wide receiver, big body wide receiver. But if I had to pick a guy right behind him that could see a decent role for his new team, for me, it's Carver Cheeks.
Yeah, like you said, a completely decimated room. The top 4 guys from this past year for UTEP are all gone. Kenny Odom, Wanamae Davis, Eric Willis, Trayvon Tate, all gone. Now, that could lead to utter disaster for UTEP next year, and you're talking about maybe the ceiling for Cheeks is, another 6 touchdowns throughout the year, which is not the worst thing in the world, but very much not a CFF upside kind of wide receiver. But I would agree with you that of these 5 guys, he would be my second guy. From there, though, man, Nico Brown, Jalen Jones, and Jared Richardson all walking into situations that I don't really love. We can go with Nico Brown because on one hand, you can convince me on the fact that Nico Brown's walking into Stanford, another situation where they just don't really have much coming back. But the problem is, even less so than UTEP, I really don't trust Stanford next year. I am concerned about their quarterback situation. When Davis Warren is looking like your best option at quarterback, that's concerning.
A good sign.
When I am logging for the days of Dr. Gulbranson as your quarterback, you're in a bad spot.
Yeah.
But also the good news is Stanford loses CJ Williams. That opens up a lot of targets there. Problem is it doesn't open them up in the spot that Nico Brown's going to be playing him in because Williams is very much an outside guy. Nico Brown played mostly slot when he was at Yale there. So, again, just not the puzzle pieces aren't fitting together like I would want to there for me to be really excited about Nico Brown. Do you have any thoughts there, Chris?
The pathway is just so clouded. He would need so much to go his way in order to find a productive role. I think they brought in 6 wide receiver transfers to Stanford. So I'm just not overly excited for Nico Brown, man. So I don't think I'm going to be investing in Nico Brown. Same with Cody Jackson. Cody Jackson actually spent time at Oklahoma, correct?
And then ahead here, Chris. He's not even one of the 5 we have on the screen.
Oh, he's not. My apologies.
No, we'll get to Cody Jackson in a second. He was one of those guys I threw on here as if we have time, we can talk about him.
Gotcha. Gotcha. I got the show sheet completely wrong. But Jalen Jones, another playmaking slot wide receiver, 64.2% of his 1,100 yards came after the catch. But he's, again, just another one of these wide receivers that's going to need a lot to go his way in order to be productive, man.
Oh no! Again, he's one of Jones is very similar to LJ Phillips, right? Where if in a vacuum, he's one of the best FCS wide receivers
Yep.
transferring up to this level. Problem is, I don't even know if he makes the starting lineup here. Like Kenny Johnson and Coy Eakin are locks into starting, right? So that's one slot position, one outside position gone. Then you got Malcolm Simmons, who is kind of that in between slot outside guy. I think most likely he starts in the slot. And then you got Micah Hudson, who would be on that other outside spot. So that could end up taking up all four starting wide receiver slots. The only way that Jones really makes it out on the field is if Hudson disappears again and they move Simmons outside, putting Jones in that secondary slot position. So that's how he gets on the field. And that you already need a lot to go right for that to happen. And even then, I still think he's the fourth, fifth option in this passing attack, right? Like, You're going to use Kenny Johnson. You're going to use Coy Eakin, who's coming back, right? You got Malcolm Simmons, and you got Terrence Carter involved here as well. So it's like, you would need a lot to go right for Jones to have a really great year for Texas Tech. So that's just very unfortunate for me. And then Jared Richardson's in a very similar spot here with Duke. Very similar to what we were talking about with Javen Nichols last week, Chris, where this would be a lot more exciting if it weren't for the fact that we're staring down the barrel of a Walker Eaget starting quarterback for Duke season. And boy, I don't like that very much. Because otherwise, I would be kind of excited about this. We've already seen Duke take an Ivy League player in Cooper Barquet, turning them into a contributor in year one, so we know they can do it. Problem is, I just really don't trust the quarterback situation there anymore. So your thoughts on Richardson before we touch on these last couple guys here, Chris? I know you're desperate to talk about Cody Jackson.
No real thoughts. Just it's going to come down to QB play, and is the QB going to be able to do enough to make Jared Richardson fantasy relevant? And my answer is no.
So let's talk about these last two guys here. We'll talk about Cody Jackson. These are, again, not on the screen, but two guys that I consider putting into the show, but we got time. Let's talk about them. What are your thoughts on Cody Jackson there, Chris? He's headed from Tarleton State to Iowa State. What are you thinking?
Yeah. And before Tarleton State, he spent time at Oklahoma. So he has the prowess to be a wide receiver at a big program. He's kind of seen what it takes to get there. He's fast. The Iowa State wide receiver room decimated, another wide receiver room that has just been completely wiped out via the transfer portal. So
it is ridiculous, dude.
Yeah, he's a 6-foot wide receiver playing primarily from the Z position on the field. So a lot of outside reps for him. If he can get on the field early, if he can be the wide receiver one for Iowa State, there's a good chance that Cody Jackson sees some decent volume this season, man.
Maybe. I don't know, man. Like, one, Iowa State has the chance to be an absolute dumpster fire this year. They just lost too much. Like you talk about that wide receiver room, decimated doesn't even do it justice. Among all their wide receivers, they have one returning from last year that recorded stats for them, and that is Dominic Overby. He only recorded 7 catches, 87 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Yikes. Yikes. That's a lot to replace. Granted, it is the Big 12, but man, I think it's going to be a rough year for the Cyclones. You got Jalen Rayner at quarterback, who we do know during his time at Arkansas State loves peppering those outside threats. So that does lead you to believe that Cody Jackson could end up getting that. But you could also go to Dominic Overby, who I just mentioned is the only receiver returning for Iowa State last year. I could absolutely see if he, takes a step up this next upcoming year, maybe they almost reward him for sticking around, right? So that's a bit of a thorn in the side there. You also got Amari Hayes coming in from Tulane, who's been pretty successful at his last 2 programs for the most part. So I could see him kind of stealing some targets there. I think that Iowa State, there's just too much for me that needs to be settled for me to go fully in on Cody Jackson. Now, maybe if I hear some good stuff early on in the spring, and it's like Cody Jackson's clearly the guy, we brought him in here to be the number one, then yeah, I'll go for it, right? But for right now, I think it's a little bit too much to project there for my sake. And the other guy I wanted to talk about here is Josh Derry, the wide receiver out of Monmouth, headed over to UCF. This is another guy kind of like Nico Brown, where I wanted the pieces to fit together in this puzzle, and they're just not. Because I invested not a lot, but like one of my favorite late round throws at wide receiver last year was just taking shots on Chris Domerkant and DJ Black as the outside guys for UCF last year, because Scott Frost's offense worked best when he has a top outside wide receiver option. And so when I saw Josh Derry, who has had 2 consecutive years in the FCS of 900 yards, and he had his best season last year with 12 touchdowns, I was kind of excited. I'm like, okay, this is maybe we get our second chance here of a guy coming in and potentially being that outside threat for Scott Frost, and he is just not, because he is a slot receiver, very much a slot receiver, tiny guy, could not translate to the outside whatsoever. And that's very unfortunate, because UCF already kind of has their slot guy in Dwayne Thomas Jr. He did not leave, unlike Chris Domerkant and DJ Black. That outside position is still wide open. Unfortunately, I do not think that Josh Derry is going to be able to translate to the outside there. And if that's the case, I don't really want him, which sucks. Because I like I like the stats I'm seeing from Derry, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Yep. So. I'm with you, man. The profile tells me that he can be productive. I just don't know if the situation is going to say the same thing. So I'm with you.
All righty. Let's finish up real quick here. I want to touch on one guy here, and that is Taron Dickens, the quarterback out of Western Carolina. Still has not found his home yet. And boy, if you look at it from last year, eye-popping stats. 366 passing attempts last year for 3,499 yards and 38 passing touchdowns. Just absolutely torched the FCS last year. You would think that would put him in line to be in a really solid place for like an air raid system. He wants to throw the ball around a lot. I kind of thought he might work out pretty well at Duke. There's one big problem, but also a small problem. And the fact that he is small. He's 5'11", 180. That's a real small size for a quarterback. That's a real small size for a quarterback. And so I think that's part of his issue as to why he has not found a home, despite the fact that he actually set the completion percentage? Yes, like most consecutive completions last year. I think he had like 49 straight completions in his game against Wofford. Like, it was just absolutely insane. He ended that game 53 of 58. So he just on again, clearly a very talented passer, right? I mean, his completion percentage last year was 73.2%. So like, that's really, really solid. But again, like, I'd be interested to see where he ends up, but clearly the fact he hasn't found a spot yet tells me that there's a lot of people looking at him and saying, don't think he's going to quite work out at this level. Your thoughts, Chris?
Yeah. Thoughts are in the same wavelength there. It's going to be interesting to see what program he ends up at. Again, if he goes to a situation where the quarterback room is wide open and they're dying for a guy to come in and just give him some kind of production, back end draft for me, my quarterback 5, quarterback 6, when I'm reaching for a little bit of possible output for fantasy. So that's what Taron Dickens is going to be for me.
All righty. Well, that's it for FCS players. We probably have discussed, that'll be the most we discuss most of these guys probably for the rest of the season. Dude, I went back and looked at like last year's FCS show, and like, man, we were talking about some guys that I just completely forgot about. I'm like, I can't even believe we talked about this. I think I was a little bit more harsh in terms of like cutting it down this year in terms of the number of FCS. I think last year we talked about like 25 different guys or something like that. This year we cut it down to 15, because I was like, there's guys that I could have made cases for, but I was just looking at them like, I'll be stretching so hard. I'm going to pull a muscle if I talk about some of these guys. So
yeah,
I think we did good.
It's a good group.
Again, I think for the most part, we're doing well here in terms of the guys that'll actually provide some kind of impact. But this is college fantasy, right? There's always going to be guys that come out of just absolutely nowhere. But with that, Chris, we have come to the end of our show. Appreciate you.
Already?
Appreciate all of you guys out there for listening. If you guys have not, make sure you leave a like, a comment, and a subscribe if you're watching this on the YouTube side of things. If you're on the podcast side of things, make sure you just follow the show, leave a 5-star review, especially a written review, wherever you can. Make sure you check out the rest of the Campus to Canton podcast network of shows ranging on pretty much anything you could think of related to the college fantasy game. And we'll see you guys back here next Monday, where the Way Too Early draft special will be released to all of you guys. 9 rounds with 12 different CFF experts. You guys love it every year, and you're going to love it again this year. And then the week after, we're going to break down that draft even further. So really looking forward to these next couple of weeks for you guys. Until then, really appreciate you guys once again, and I hope you guys have a wonderful and blessed week. See y'all.